This is CBS Sports HQ, and we are going to pick every college football game against the spread that involves ranked teams. And last week, Danny Kanell going head-to-head with Chip Patterson after a really bad opening week. Danny bounces back, a winning week, 6-5. Chip has another winning week, 7-5. His season record, yeah, he's pointing to it, 18-10 against the spread for Chip Patterson. These guys either picking a side or picking a total here in these games. And as we welcome you into studio here, Chris Hassel joined by Danny Kanell, and Chip Patterson is with us as well. There's kind of a theme of this week, especially with the early games at noon on Saturday. It's ranked teams going on the road and laying a bunch of points. And really, we've seen 6 ranked teams already lose this season to unranked teams. That's the most through 2 weeks in the season. So let's start, Danny, with Alabama going to Wisconsin. Maybe when this game first came on the schedule a few years ago, you thought it would be a lot sexier than it is now. Wisconsin hasn't looked that great under Luke Fickell. That's why Alabama is laying 15.5 points here with the total at 50.5.
Oh, those road favorites. I don't like them at all. I would lean towards Alabama, but I'm going to go attack the total in this one, and I'm going to go over. Now, I've vacillated back and forth on this one. Which way am I going to go? I was on the under earlier, then now I'm on the over. After going back and watching Alabama, this is 2 games in a row that there have been opportunities to be made in the pass game that they have not been burned on it. I do think Tyler Van Dyke will hit on a couple big plays to put up some touchdowns against Alabama's defense, but I also think Alabama will iron some things out offensively as well. Jalen Milroe is too dynamic as a runner for Wisconsin to slow down completely. So I'm going to go over the 50.5 total. I think there'll be more points than the experts think. I probably think Alabama pulls away late, but no matter what, I think there'll be points on the board.
Lay 'em. Okay, so Alabama does have some weaknesses. Alabama does have some different ways that you could take advantage of their inexperience in the secondary, of some of their, offensive line communication issues. But I really don't feel like Wisconsin has the pieces to be able to expose that. The Crimson Tide might be in trouble certainly later on in the season, but right now I think that they are going to rely on Jalen Milroe in those legs. I think they are going to be able to clean up some of those issues up front. But Wisconsin's defensive line is not up to par. Their wide receivers are not quite dynamic enough. And even though you would think hiring a coordinator like Phil Longo is going to lead to an up-tempo approach, which, by the way, Alabama did struggle with South Florida's tempo, Wisconsin has not actually been going that fast through their first 2 games. Now, maybe the Badgers have been playing possum because they went up against Western Michigan, and an FCS team. But I tend to believe that Wisconsin just doesn't have the horses or the pace to be able to keep up. I got Crimson Tide. I will lay the 3 scores.
SEC has 6 of the top 7 teams in the AP poll. That's the first time they've ever done it. That has to just warm your heart, Danny.
It does. Don't ask me if they're deserving to be in there. Don't go down that rabbit hole.
Let's move on to another noon Eastern time game on Saturday. Oklahoma State. Man, that was a crazy game against Arkansas where they had to come back and win that game in overtime. They're on the road in state against Tulsa. This is a huge number, Chip. 20.5 with a total 62.5.
Yeah, I don't want to mess with the spread at all, because there's one thing that stands out to me about Oklahoma State that I'm going to have to base all my picks on. It is the fact that Oklahoma State's offense has not been very efficient. Certainly nowhere close to what you would expect when you've got a first-team All-American in Ollie Gordon at running back and a 7th-year quarterback in Alan Bowman and all those returning starters up front, because this Oklahoma State team right now is 64th in points per drive. This team is 91st nationally, 91, averaging 5.34 yards per play. Special teams, hidden yards, they've been able to scrap and claw to be able to get through these last 2 games, be able to win them. Obviously, one by a comfortable margin, one deep into overtime. I just don't think Oklahoma State's offense has really been clicking on all cylinders. So I'm going to go with under the total. I'm not afraid of Tulsa, but I am afraid of trying to trust a a inefficient offense to cover a big spread. So we're going to go under the total.
Oh, Chip, don't be scared. That was an SEC defense they were going against last week. I mean, that is almost impossible to do. They're not going to face that this week. I think this is the get-right game for Ollie Gordon. I think they'll get back to their ways of force-feeding him the football. Alan Bowman working him a little bit more conservative approach, just kind of dinking and dunking the ball and taking your shots down the field when they are there. I think the confidence they gained, that was probably the game of the weekend last week, by the way, against Arkansas, coming all the way back, getting to overtime, getting the two-point conversion to, put that thing on ice. I think that's exactly what Mike Gundy needed. They're going to address some of the problems that they had on defense where there were a lot of guys running wide open and they gave up a lot of plays. But Talon Green does not play for Tulsa. I think they'll play a lot better on the defensive side of the ball. The veterans on this team, it is an older team in college football, they will rally around that. They'll be more focused. I think they win and cover.
All right, another ranked team on the road laying points, and this is one of the more intriguing game of the weekend. In fact, I believe Josh Pate is taking his tour there. Number 16 LSU laying 6.5 at South Carolina. Danny, LSU is the team that has a loss already. South Carolina's feeling great after they just blew out Kentucky on the road.
What I'm trying to figure out is that game more about South Carolina being this team that's going to be potentially a surprise of the season, or is Kentucky, do they have serious issues and maybe they're back to the Kentucky we knew 15 years ago that wasn't very good? I'm going to lean towards Kentucky may not be as good as we thought. Their offense was atrocious. Don't get me wrong. South Carolina's defense was a force to be reckoned with. They made several big plays in that one for pressuring Brock Vandegrift. But they're going against a veteran quarterback in Garrett Nussmeier who has way better weapons, including Kyron Lacey. I think LSU goes on the road and wins. Now, I will, full disclosure, I did switch this pick too.
What?
It's been a lot of going
Another
back and forth.
flip-flop?
Well, it was over 7. It was over a touchdown. If it went back up there, I might lean South Carolina as a home dog. But that's 6.5 under that key number. I think South Carolina goes in there, gets it done. I also think LSU's defense will provide some problems for Norris Sellers, the freshman. I'll take LSU here on the road.
So the unit that South Carolina can hang their hat on is the defensive line, and Dylan Stewart's been an absolute breakthrough. Unfortunately, they are running into an LSU offensive line that has a couple of potential first-round draft picks at the 2 tackle positions. So I don't think South Carolina is going to be able to disrupt everything quite like they did against Kentucky and the Wildcats offensive line. But I do think that with this opponent, with this environment, and with that South Carolina defense, we're going to find a Gamecocks team that is going to be a little frisky. Now, can South Carolina hang on the scoreboard and score as much as Garrett Nussmeier over the course of 4 quarters? No. But what we have noticed with these LSU Tigers is in their 2 games, they've been a little bit slow starting. I mean, it was 10-10 at halftime against USC, but way closer than it needed to be in the follow-up game against Nichols. And so if LSU, on the road with a little bit of an early start, going up against a stout defensive line and those South Carolina fans that'll be rip-roaring ready to go, I could see a slow start for the Tigers. So I'm actually going to go South Carolina plus 4.5 in the first half, because that's about as long as I'm willing to extend all the intangibles before the overall talent advantage, which LSU has, likely takes over after halftime.
That's going to be a great atmosphere there, especially if they can stay in that game in the second half. There was no better early atmosphere, at least in the morning, than Ann Arbor last week. It's going to be a little bit sleepier this week. They have a noon Eastern time kick at home against Arkansas State. The number is 22.5, and the quarterback situation is a mess right now for Michigan. Danny, I'm glancing at the screen. You're not going to fade the Wolverines here. Why?
I don't know why, Chris, to be honest with you.
Well, you're really confident in your picks
I'm telling you, I am not. I hate the slate this week. I backed them against Fresno State, lost. It's a favorite. I backed them against Texas as a dog, and they lost and got smoked. I'm backing them for the third time. Now, here's the thing. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me thrice, I will never back the Wolverines again. But I do think this is the game where they are able to push around the opponent along the lines of scrimmage. I think the defense, who is not that big of a problem, I think that might have been more about the Texas Longhorns. I still believe in this defense, that they are one of the top-tier defenses in the country. The offense does have issues. It has to get the run game going. The offensive line still trying to find continuity. I think they get Donovan Edwards going, and I think it calms things down for Davis Warren, who will finally step up and have a nice game. I'll back the Wolverines here and lay the points.
Yeah, what is it that all the traders say? Buy the dip? Oh, baby, we got a buy low situation, not just with Michigan. How about with the Michigan offense? These are some of the sickest words I will say publicly all week. Michigan team total over. Because if there was an opponent that you would be able to use to get that confidence going, it's going to be a defense like Arkansas State, which is more than happy to allow explosive runs. I mean, we don't even need to worry about whether the downfield passing game is there, because I expect that we are going to see Donovan Edwards be able to bring forward some of those, 40, 50 plus yard runs that he's become so famous for throughout his career. That this is the time where Sharon Moore and the rest of that offensive staff, if they start to get a little bit of success, there is no reason, given all the grumbling around this program in Ann Arbor, for them to call the dogs off. No, no, no. If you start to have some success, you keep your foot on the gas and you hang 40. Luckily, because of their recent failures, we don't have to get all the way to 40, so we'll just go Michigan team total over.
They've got one game to try to get it right, because USC is coming to town right after that next week on CBS. We're going to continue our picks against the spread here as college football rolls on here in September, with some later afternoon games, including the Oregon Ducks, who have not looked very good, having to go on the road to Corvallis for a rivalry, and Cam Ward looking to keep slinging it for number 10 Miami. The Miami Hurricanes into the top 10 this week as Cam Ward sets the record for most passing yards through 2 games in Miami history. 30 more yards than Ken Dorsey back in 2001 when Miami won their most recent national championship. And he should put up big numbers again this week, because they've got Ball State coming to town. Danny Kanell is here, so is Chip Patterson, to help pick games against the spread involving ranked teams. Chip, I'll let you start us off here. This is the first time Miami's been a 35-plus point favorite against an FBS team in almost 20 years.
Okay, so you're going to tell me that we are going to give Ball State a 35-point lead to start the game in a sleepy noon kickoff there in Hard Rock Stadium? You're going to tell me that in the year of the MAC, when Eastern Michigan is going to cover when they go play on the road at Washington, when Bowling Green gave Penn State all it could handle at Penn State, and when Northern Illinois walked into Notre Dame Stadium and walked out a winner, in the year of the MAC, you're going to give Ball State a 35-point lead? Psh, no, sir. Ball State plus the points.
Does it change your opinion at all that this is a 3:30 Eastern time game?
Oh, no. You sure?
Maybe a dozen more Miami fans.
That's a big difference.
Nope. Not in the year of the MAC. Not in the year of the MAC.
Sticking with Ball State.
It may be the year of the MAC for some, but not for Ball State this weekend. Clearly, Northern Illinois had an incredible win. You mentioned that. Bowling Green was incredible versus Penn State. Those are 2 of the top teams predicted to potentially win the conference. Ball State is not. I think after this game, that record that stands 2 weeks, most passing yards for Hurricanes quarterbacks after first 2 weeks, put it at 3 weeks. This is going to be a Cam Ward stat day. The other thing that has really been impressive is Miami's defense. I think they'll make it a long day for this Ball State team. I think Miami rolls. I think this is a new team. This is one that's finally living up to expectations. I do not think they suffer that letdown this week. I say they roll, in large part because Cam Ward has been the most special transfer portal quarterback of the season so far.
Yeah, they've done very well the last couple of seasons in August and September against FBS opponents, including that Week 1 win at Florida. Let's move on to a rivalry game out in Oregon. You've got the Oregon Ducks, number 9 in the country, laying 16.5 in Corvallis against their hated rivals who now don't have a conference. This is the 128th meeting, Danny. First time they've ever been in separate conferences.
Similar to Michigan, I have backed Oregon Ducks twice, and I believe I am 0 for 2 on them. I'm going to go ahead. I'm a sucker. I'll do it again. But if they burn me, I will not do it again. I do think this Oregon Ducks team will figure it out. Ashton Genty last week, I think that's one of the best backs they'll face all year, maybe one of the best backs in the country. This is where you challenge, if you're Dan Lanning, you challenge both sides of the football, and you say, look, everyone predicted us be there. We haven't done anything yet. We have to prove that we're one of the best teams in the country. And every day that goes by, I think Dylan Gabriel will get more comfortable in this system. The offensive line, which is very young, shuffling around some pieces, they're getting better, more continuity. I think this is the breakout game for the Ducks. I'll lay the 16.5. I also think I'll go the under, too, because Oregon State, they haven't changed as far as wanting to run the football. This could be a potentially slower-paced game. I think Oregon tries to establish that as well. So I like the under, too.
Yeah, last year's Oregon State team had a few players that, could be on Oregon's level, would be on Oregon's roster and probably go get some playing time. And a lot of those players entered the transfer portal or moved on to go take their talents elsewhere. So I'm looking at this Oregon State squad, and while I'm sure the emotions of the moment are going to be huge, Corvallis is going to be rocking, I think that this is a spot where you load up your roster with the types of bodies and the types of athleticism and the types of talent that Dan Lanning has done for moments like this, that when not everything is clicking, when it is taking a little while for your veteran transfer portal quarterback to get settled, that you just still are able to out-talent and out-athlete the opponent. Boise State, I think, is probably a shade above Oregon State, and Oregon State does not have an Ashton Jeanty, so I'm going to take Oregon and lay the points as well.
Oregon State doesn't have DJU anymore either, who was a part of a 31-7 loss at Oregon last season. The home team has won 8 of the last 9 in this series. A lot like Oregon, guys, Oklahoma just has not looked good at all. I mean, they almost lost to Houston last week as a 4-touchdown favorite. They're at home laying 13.5 against a Tulane team, Danny, that really should have beaten Kansas State last week.
This is one where I think the odds makers are everything you just said. There's no way Oklahoma is going to be able. Tulane had Kansas State on the ropes. A couple bad calls maybe go their way. They potentially beat that team. I think this is one where Brent Venables will correct the issues that they've had on the defense side of the ball. And the defense really hasn't been the problem, but the offense has. And again, we expect Jackson Arnold to just go out there and execute an offense and just go out there and be a Heisman Trophy, contending quarterback. I think they'll settle in. I think they'll run the football more too, especially injury they have at receiver. But this is the game. I do think Oklahoma establishes things physically against Tulane. So I'll lay the 13.5, and I love the fact that it's under that key number of 14 points.
Oh, but Danny, at FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more, you can get a little 14.5 without having to pay too much of a tax. And that's exactly what I'm going to do, because karma might not be a player on the Chiefs. Karma might be coming in the form of what John Summerall and Tulane is deserved, because Tulane really deserved and played well enough to be able to beat Kansas State. And Brent Venables, by his own assessment, said we probably deserve to lose in that game against Houston. And I think the injuries are piling up for Oklahoma, for a team that I already had depth issues. I think that the inconsistencies offensively are tremendous. And I think that while that Oklahoma defense did a lot to make sure that Oklahoma was staying in that game, they are going to be worn out from all the time they had to spend on the field. I think Tulane is dynamic enough offensively to be able to put a scare into the Sooners. So give me Tulane, and I'll pay a little tax for the 14 and a hook.
Now you know why he's beating me. He's out here paying up to get better numbers.
Yeah, take that into account,
exactly.
Right?
Well, those don't come. There should be an asterisk. Put
an
those
asterisk
numbers under that record.
How about that, though? Oklahoma, they face Willie Fritz and his new team last week, and now they face his old team, Tulane, this week, back-to-back weeks. All right, when we come back, we're going to move to the later games, including one on CBS Sports Network involving the favorite in the Big 12, the Utah Utes. But what's going on with Cam Rising at quarterback? It's deja vu all over again and again and again for Utah fans. Cam Rising hurt, and we don't know if he's going to play this week against Utah State. Not that he needs to. Utah is a 3-touchdown favorite in that game on CBS Sports Network, 4:30 Eastern Time Saturday. Bigger question is, will he get back in time for the start of Big 12 play and back-to-back ranked opponents against Oklahoma State and Arizona moving forward? Let's pick this game and a few others here with Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson. I'm Chris Hassel. Utah on the road, rivalry game against a down Utah State team that is also dealing with quarterback issues. Spencer Petras is their starting quarterback. He got hurt week 1, and he's up in the air as well.
Micah Bernard's playing, right? The Utah running back. I'll say that they are going to hand him the ball, whoever it is, at quarterback for Utah. And this will be a get-out-of-Dodge game for Kyle Whittingham. He realizes what's at stake this season. So I do think even if Cam Rising does play, maybe he starts and they play him limited and get him out of there. If he doesn't play, though, I do think they'll be able to run the football. The defense will be able to will contain Utah State, who has struggled mightily on the offensive side of the ball. So I'll lay the points. I think Utah wins this game handily, but I also think because of the slow pace, conservative nature of it, especially in the second half, start milking the clock early. I'll say it's under the total as well.
When Cam Rising's in the game, I feel like Utah can go put up 40 points per game. Not knowing his status, let's just focus on the one thing that I do know. And if this is the battle of the brothers, well, this is the big brother that just sits on you and just makes you quit, makes you cry, uncle. We're going Utah State team total under because they didn't score nary a point against the Trojans. And I think that Utah's an even tougher defense than that. So I don't think they get into the end zone. Maybe a couple field goals.
Yeah, they didn't score last week, lost 48-0 to USC. Let's go to a 6:30 Eastern time kick. It's number 5 Ole Miss, minus 23.5 at Wake Forest. I saw this on the bottom line of another network. Ole Miss plus 125 through 2 games, the most of any team since Ole Miss in 2015.
They haven't played anybody with a pulse. I think Wake Forest has a sliver of a pulse, but I don't think it's enough for this Ole Miss team who has their eyes set on potentially a national championship. We talked a lot this offseason about the pieces they brought in through the transfer portal. Jackson Dart is playing great. The defense is playing awesome. Wake Forest is struggling somewhat to still find their identity as a team on the whole. Plus, you throw in the fact that Lane Kiffin does usually like to take care of those backers of the Ole Miss Rebels. So I'll say Ole Miss wins on the road and covers. They're clearly one of the best teams in the country. I'll lay those points.
Yeah, I mean, run this up to 27 and a half. I'll just take it and I'll lay it. As Danny mentioned right now, Wake Forest has been dealing with trying to find its quarterback going between Hank Bachmeier and Michael Kern. They're looking for some of those elder statesmen at the wide receiver position to really step up, but their defense has been as porous as ever. If you gave up 31 points to Virginia, you're going to get run over by a 50 spot against a team like Ole Miss, one of the best offenses in the entire country. So, yeah, I'll take the Rebels, and I expect it to be more of the same from Lane Kiffin's group.
All right, another late game on Saturday, or at least evening time game. It's in Texas. They'll wait for the sun to go down a bit, and then they'll kick off 7 Eastern against in-state UTSA, UT San Antonio. That's a program that's been really, really good over the last few years. But last week, Chip, they lost to Texas State by 39 points.
And what could have been, they joined the American Athletic Conference coming off a strong season, and we thought they were going to take that conference by hold, and it just never really clicked. They've lost a lot of their best players to the transfer portal. And while Jeff Traylor enthuses me every single time that he talks, I'm not sure if he's going to be able to fire up the troops enough to be able to cause a scare down there in Austin. But I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of a letdown, a little bit of a hangover coming off that huge road win. I just don't think it's going to involve Texas's defense, which has been outstanding. You know, a shutout in week 1, just 12 points against Michigan in week 2. I don't think UTSA is going to be able to score enough points here. So maybe there is a little bit of a letdown for the Texas offense. I think defense stands stout. So I'm going to go Texas UTSA under the total.
My goodness, I hate some of these games this weekend as far as confidence level of where my picks are.
It's a really weird slate this week.
It is a weird slate. As far as from the gambling perspective, I don't love where I stand on this one. This is one of the ones you hold your nose. Chip mentioned it. The fact that Texas has this massive win against Michigan on the road. They look like a national championship contender. Quinn Ewers looks awesome. How do they ramp it back up against a UTSA scheme that, like we talked about, lost last week? Texas State is a really good squad this week, but this season. By the way, keep an eye. They have a great game against Thursday night against Arizona State.
Yeah,
should be a really fun game.
Pretty much a pick 'em.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that might be more about them, but still, Texas is another level. I'm going to bank on the slow, sluggish start, and I'm going to bounce back game for Jeff Traylor, who gets his guys to dial in a little bit more. What scares me about this one, I am going to back the underdog here, is the Arch Manning effect. Because if he does get in the game late, I don't think Sark's going to try to just run out the clock. They want to get him experience, and he's pretty dynamic. So this is one where I'm holding my nose. I'm taking the dog on the road against a big number, but I don't love it.
Okay, if you're talking teams coming off big wins last week, Nebraska is one of those teams. You can say what you want about Colorado, but that place was revved up. They feel like they have the team to do what they haven't done in a long time, which is compete for a conference championship perhaps. They're ranked as high as they've been in almost 10 years, 2016, which is the last time they made a bowl game. They've got Northern Iowa FCS team coming in.
So we talk about Texas, the layoff game, the letdown game. This is a program which is new to this territory. There's so much excitement around this Nebraska program, and deservedly so. I think this is one where that sea of red comes almost to celebrate, continue the celebration, bring that energy, because they are sensing there's something special. Before the season, I said they would be 7-0 when they went to Columbus to take take on the Buckeyes. I feel even better about that now, in large part because of this young man we're looking at on the graphic. Dylan Raiola has been spectacular. I think that continues. I think Matt Rule still wants to let him throw it a little bit, get a sense for the offense, get more comfortable with his weapons on the outside. So I'll lay him with Nebraska.
Too many daggone points. Too many daggone points. And Chris, you know, Northern Iowa, that's like one of the 10 best teams at the FCS level. In fact, there are some all Division I wide power ratings that have Northern Iowa penciled in somewhere around like an Air Force, you know, a middle of the pack Mountain West team. And so using that as a reference point, I went into the Chipalytics and beep, beep, boop, boop, pop, pop, pop. This should be like a 21-point spread. And you're going to give me all the way up to 28 and a hook? Yeah, I think that with the letdown factor put into the whole equation of Northern Iowa being a good football team, it's just a few too many points. I'll be looking at Nebraska, curious to see how they handle it. You know, the message from Matt Rule is that everybody else on the team needs to raise their level of compete to the freshman quarterback. Let's see how that message lands with that locker room.
Yeah, Mark Farley has been the head coach at Northern Iowa forever. I've seen him beat teams in Ames against Iowa State, almost beat a ranked Iowa team in Kinnick Stadium, so he could keep that thing close. Let's move on to the Georgia Bulldogs, who are taking on Kentucky. These teams headed in opposite directions right now. Brock Vandegrift was polled last week. He started 3 for 10, 30 yards, a pick against South Carolina. And Chip, as you know, he played in this matchup last year for Georgia. You already said lay him, huh?
Yeah. I mean, come on. You're telling me a team with offensive line issues is going to be going up against Georgia's defensive front and things are going to go well. If South Carolina was able to completely disrupt anything that Kentucky wanted to do offensively, what do you think those Georgia Bulldogs are going to do? This is another in a string of results that are going to continue to drive home the one thing that everyone in college football can agree on. Are there too many SEC teams in the top 7? Yes. But is number 1 wrong? No. That's the best daggum team in the country, and I think they covered this big spread.
Oh, Chip, this is a revenge game for Brock Vandegrift to show him they took the wrong quarterback by going with Carson Beck.
Yeah, right.
Problem is, he doesn't have that offense around him. I totally agree with you. I think those Georgia defenders, this is one thing about him going against your old team. I faced this one time in my NFL career. I was on the Giants, got cut, was on the Falcons, and we played the Giants the first year after, and I actually got to play in the game. Those Giants defenders, the ones I went against in practice, they hated not being able to hit me. So they saw me as a live target. And boy, Michael Strahan let me know about it all game long as he was coming after me. I think those Georgia defenders do the same thing. I'll take the under as well because I don't know if Kentucky scores many points at all. I could see 42-3, just under and a cover. So I'll back the dogs and the under.
All right, another SEC team laying a lot of points is Tennessee at home. This is the biggest spread of the week involving a ranked team. 49.5 it's steamed up to from 47.5 a couple of days ago against a Kent State team that has only covered, I believe, 1 of their last 11 games, which are all straight up losses.
But it's the year of the MAC. I want to hear what Chip does.
Year of the MAC, Chip.
Year of the MAC, Chip. What do we got?
Golden flashes.
Take them.
They are at the bottom of the spreadsheet. I understand Ball State ain't at the top of the MAC, but Kent State's at like the bottom of the FBS. I'll tell you what, the biggest storyline for me coming out of Tennessee's romp of NC State is just affirmation of how strong that team is defensively, especially up front. I look at this game, and whether or not Kentucky covers this spread just comes down to how long Josh Heupel wants to leave the starters in. I don't want to gamble based on that decision making, so instead I'm going to go with what I feel confident in, and that's Kent State will not reach the end zone. So I'm going to go with a little Kent State team total under. We ride that Vols defensive front, one of the best in the country.
You should have bought that thing up to 7.5.
Yes, that's right. Bought it over there. I love when Chip brings out his saving. That's when you know he's fired up about a pick. I'll go ahead and just lay him with Tennessee. This team is a wagon that Tom Fornelli has been back, and he's called him a wagon. He's officially stamped him there. I think they absolutely roll through this Kent State team. Nico will get his stats, but then I also think the backups will get theirs too. I feel very good about the Vols in this one.
Coming off that 51-10 win against NC State on a quote-unquote neutral field last week. We have a CBS doubleheader coming up on Saturday that's pretty darn good. We'll see what Notre Dame does as they try to respond after the stunning loss to Northern Illinois. They're taking on Purdue, and we also have a rivalry game in Colorado. Coach Prime up against Colorado State at night. It is time for Best Bets, presented by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Make every moment more. Only 2 ranked-on-ranked matchups this week. One of them is on Friday at 8 Eastern. It's number 20 Arizona at number 14 Kansas State. Another one of those weird non-Big 12 games, even though it features a Big 12 team that's not a conference game. Also have number 24 Boston College at number 6 Missouri. And there's your CBS doubleheader as well. We'll pick both those games, including Colorado at Colorado State. All right, we've got Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson here to pick them for us. And Chip's been on fire this season, 18-10. Danny was over 500 last week, so here we go. Number 20 Arizona. Number 14, Kansas State. K-State's laying 7.5 at home, though, Danny. Arizona has the longest winning streak in the country at 9 and some real playmakers. They do.
Tetero and McMillan, after that opener with 304 yards, was held in check somewhat, and that's where I'm going to go ahead and tackle this one. I think Kansas State has a game plan for him. They're coming off a game, maybe should have lost there down at Yulman Stadium in New Orleans against Tulane. I think they bounce back strong. This is one of those games they have to have. Avery Johnson's legs get it done for them. I'll say Kansas State wins and covers against an Arizona's team that I'm not that sure about, but I feel better about Kansas State.
All right, so I'm going to jump on this total and go ahead and get it quick because it's been moving ever since it opened. Bad number on open. We got through 56. At this point, I feel confident enough. You got to run that thing up close to 60. So I look at the matchup, specifically what Kansas State had defensively. What did Kansas State have defensively? Issues. A lot of them. A lot of free runners, a lot of explosive plays for Tulane in that game that they were able to win down in New Orleans. I think that means that Tetero and McMillan will start to have some more success. Arizona was dealing with some minor issues on the offensive line. It's one of the reasons why the offense in general was kept in check. You got to think they're going to be as healthy as possible now that the competition is ramping up. Noah Fafita, Tetero, and McMillan, they're going to find a big plays down the field. And then you'll go back to that New Mexico opener. New Mexico was able to move right through this Arizona defense. And so I see a lot of scores for both these teams. Should be an absolute thriller. So I'm just going to be sitting there with my over and just root for touchdowns.
Okay, yeah, that total has gone up a couple points in the last couple days to 58.5, and Chip says it might head up towards 60. A weird start time for this one. Another ranked-on-ranked game, but it's an odd one. 12:45 Eastern time. Number 24 BC, Bill O'Brien, got the win over Florida State. Saw what happened to Georgia Tech, though, after that happened, and they jumped into the rankings. They lost at Syracuse. But it's BC at Missouri. And, Danny, Missouri's the first team to open with back-to-back shutouts in 5 years, but they shut out a couple of tomato cans.
Yeah, they've outscored their opponents 89-0. You mentioned Boston College getting into the top 25 in large part because of that win over Florida State. You know what happened in that game? There were plays to be made, and DJU couldn't make them. A couple wide-open touchdown passes that he airmailed. You know who's not going to miss those passes?
Brady Cook.
Brady Cook to Luther Burden, Theo Weiss. He's got some weapons. He's a veteran quarterback. You know what else is going to happen? Thomas Castellanos. We saw the type of player he is. Very Kyler Murray-like on the field. He's pretty electric as a runner, good enough as a passer. I think he gets some points as well. So similar to what Chip was saying about the previous game we talked about, I'm going to sit back and watch a shootout unfold. I like the over in this one.
Let the children sing. Exactly what Danny was saying, because the best offense that Boston College has is when you let Thomas Castellanos go out there and make plays in the open field. You know, we thought that Bill O'Brien coming in with all of his NFL background might try to force him to be someone who he is not. Credit to B.O.B. because he understands that the best chance for Boston College to be able to find the end zone is by letting number 1 go and do his thing. And I agree with you, Danny, that this Boston College defense, you know, they played Florida State's offense. They played Duquesne. Florida State's offense, yes, better than Duquesne, but really they have not faced anything in the same world as what Missouri's offense presents. So I do think over the total is the best play.
Okay, let's move to the CBS doubleheader, which begins at 3:30 Eastern time. It's Notre Dame coming off the stunning loss as a 28-point favorite against NIU, Northern Illinois. They're going to Purdue, and they're laying now 10.5. That line was up about 2 touchdowns, but there is, Danny, some uncertainty around Riley Leonard, the quarterback for Notre Dame.
Yes, we talked about this in the Cover 3 podcast earlier as this news kind of came out. There's a lot of speculation. Is he going to play? Is he not? I've backed a lot of favorites on the road. I am not going to back the Irish in this one. On the flip side, we just took some overs. I'm going to go under on this one because I think that's what saves the day for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in this game. I think the defense, which did play well enough to win against Northern Illinois, played great against Texas A&M in that opener. I think they come today, and as good as Hudson Card was, it was still a very inferior opponent where he completed 24 or 25 of his passes. They did have the bye week, so I think they'll have a game plan for Notre Dame's offense as well. I think it's a lower scoring affair, so I'll take the under. The odds makers think so as well. That 47.5 jumps out to you. I think it's even lower scoring than that.
I'll take Purdue to be able to hang inside this number. And the thing that's important if Purdue's going to do this or threaten for the upset win is going to be able to get the ball out quickly, because Notre Dame's defensive front against Purdue's offensive line is a big advantage for the Fighting Irish. However, I do think that with Graham Harrell, that offensive coordinator, his second year working with Hudson Card, I think that they're going to try to be able to build in a game plan, one that, as Danny mentioned, they've had a lot of time to work on to be able to make plays on the perimeter, get the ball away from the line of scrimmage, and then try to let Purdue's playmakers go out there. Deion Burks ain't there anymore. We understand that, but they do still have some gifted players in that wide receiver room. And so, yeah, I will take Purdue, the spoiler makers, to put an upset scare into Notre Dame and stay inside this number.
Oh, okay. And after that one, it's Colorado at Colorado State. Many probably don't remember the game from last season because it didn't end until like 2:30 in the morning, but you remember the highlights. Colorado coming back, winning in double overtime, and then Coach Prime is Sportsman of the Year and all that stuff because of how they started. Well, things might be starting to go off the rails a little bit after that ugly game at Nebraska. Colorado, the line now 7.5. That's come down a couple of points, Danny.
Yeah, and the one thing that will be nice is we don't have to debate whether Shedor's song is going to play after a touchdown because it's on the road in this game. You're right. We mentioned this game last year. It was a wild game, and I think it's similar fashion because Colorado, there's always a lot of drama, a lot of excitement around it, but I do think this is a game where their offense can get back on track. The run game has been non-existent, but I don't know if Colorado State has the dudes on the defensive side of the ball to do what Nebraska did and really shut down that aerial attack. I think that Shedeur Sanders will have a big day, Travis Hunter as well, but watch out for BFN. You know what BFN is? Braden Fowler Nicolosi, the quarterback for Colorado State, who went off on Colorado's defense. Colorado's defense is not very good, so I'll back the Buffs. I'll lay the 7.5, but I also like the over. I think there'll be a lot of points in this one.
Yeah, give me Colorado. I guess you could say that I do believe. I at least believe in them being able to cover 7.5, maybe win this game by double digits. This is the point in the narrative arc, and sometimes it does feel like we're watching the reality show. This is where it looks like things are bad, and then you're able to get the win, and then you're able to stuff it in the face of all the haters. Colorado State has not looked like anywhere close to even the median version of what I thought the Rams could be this year. I think that Colorado is able to get a win against a lesser opponent that gives them a little bit of a boost following what has been 2 weeks of kind of low points around that program.
It is nice to see, though, that they're playing this on home sites again. In Fort Collins for the first time since '96. They used to play that at the home of the Denver Broncos for many years. Chip Patterson and Danny Kanell giving us picks against the spread this week. These are the best bets from the fellas. A couple of ranked matchups to start. They agree on the over in the Boston College-Missouri game of 54.5. They also agree on Colorado minus 7.5 against Colorado State. And you can hear much more from Danny, Chip, Tom Fornelli, Bud Elliott, and others on the Cover 3 podcast. Check it out. Scan that QR code. It'll take you right there. Download and follow, and it'll alert you every time a new pod is dropped.